Hey, what's going on, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 wide receivers for the Fantasy Football 2020 season. At number 10, I have DJ Moore. In 2019, he had over 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns with Kyle Allen at quarterback. So he had a pretty good season with a really trash quarterback. He was 10th in the league in targets with 135, and he averaged a bit over 15 fantasy points per game. He played 92% of the snaps and 12.6% in the slot. He also had a 24.3% target share, and he had over 23.2% of the red zone target share, which is really high for a receiver. That's one of the top red zone percentages you'll see. DJ Moore had these stats with Kyle Allen at QB, so I do expect him to do a lot better now with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. So the Panthers did sign Robbie Anderson this offseason. So as you can see, it's going to be DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel with tight end Ian Thomas starting. There is a new coaching staff with Matt Rule, head coach, and offense coordinator Joe Brady coming from LSU to Carolina. The offense should be high tempo, should be like a college-style offense, a bit faster with Christian McCaffrey obviously at running back. They are going to have a bottom 10 defense, I believe, because they lost Luke Kuechly. They also lost James Bradbury in free agency. They did draft all defense in this draft, with their first-round pick being Derek Brown, the defensive tackle, so their entire defense basically going to be all rookies. They do also have a tough schedule according to projected team win totals. I do expect the Panthers to be down a lot of games, but I do expect them to be in a lot of high-scoring games with that up-tempo offense. At number 9, I have Odell Beckham Jr. In 2019, he had a little bit over 1,000 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. That was probably his worst season in his career. He was 12th in the league in targets, 133. He was second on the team in targets behind Jarvis Landry. He averaged a bit over 12 fantasy points per game. He did play 97.3% of the snaps and 14.2% of the slot. And he had a 25.6% target share, and he had 17.6% of the red zone target share. Odell was injured the majority of last season. He did have core muscle surgery, and he should be fully recovered by now. There's a new head coach in town with Kevin Stefanski. It's going to be new and improved. They improved the offensive line with the addition of Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin. Baker Mayfield will have more time in the pocket now with that improved O-line. The Browns also do have an easy schedule according to projected team win totals. I do expect a massive bounce back here in 2020 for Odell, just because he was hurt last year, the majority of the season. He was also coached by a terrible coach in Freddie Kitchens. There were terrible play calls all season. So I do expect Odell to bounce back for around 1,200 yards and maybe 8 touchdowns. Number 8, I have Allen Robinson. He had just over 1,100 receiving yards last season and 7 touchdowns. He was third in the league in targets with 154, and this was all with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. Allen Robinson played over 97% of the snaps, and he played 23.8% of the slot. He averaged a bit over 15 fantasy points per game, and he had a 27% target share with a 30% red zone target share. The Bears were pretty much always looking for Allen Robinson in the red zone. The QBs that Allen Robinson has had throwing to him over the years include Chad Henne, Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky, Mike Glennon, and Chase Daniel. So there's always pretty much been a bad quarterback throwing to Allen Robinson. The Bears recently did trade for Nick Foles, who will probably be the best quarterback that Allen Robinson has ever caught passes from. The Bears did cut Taylor Gabriel and Trey Burton, so the receivers are pretty much going to be Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, and Ted Ginn. They also have Jimmy Graham at tight end, who's pretty much dust now. He's not going to do much. They did draft Cole Kmet, but I don't expect much his first year. And Allen Robinson is going to be a free agent in 2021. There are contract extension talks going on right now, so we'll see if they sign Allen Robinson to extension. If not, there's just going to be extra motivation for Allen Robinson to ball out this season. At number 7, I have Kenny Golladay. I was thinking about putting Kenny Golladay over Godwin. I do have Godwin over Kenny Golladay for now. Kenny Golladay balled out last year. He almost had 1,200 receiving yards, and he had 11 touchdowns. He was 20th in the league in targets. He played a little bit over 91% of the snaps, and he averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game. He had a 21.1% target share, but he had a nice 25% red zone target share. So they're always looking for him in the end zone. I mean, especially as you can see, he had 11 touchdowns last season, which he led all receivers in receiving touchdowns. Kenny Golladay had all this success with terrible quarterbacks at QB. They had guys like Jeff Driscoll and David Blau starting for the Lions. Matthew Stafford obviously got hurt last year. Matthew Stafford now is medically cleared. Stafford is pretty much fully healed from his injuries from last year. Lions do have an easy schedule according to projected team win totals, and I do expect them to also have a pretty bad defense. They did draft Jeff Okudah in the first round, but they also lost Darius Slay. Their secondary is not going to be that great, and also their defensive line is really weak. And Kenny Golladay is also going to be a free agent in 2021, so that's just going to lead to extra motivation this season. As long as Matthew Stafford can stay healthy, I do see Kenny Golladay balling out for about 1,300 yards and double-digit touchdowns. At number 6, I have Chris Godwin. He had a massive breakout season last year. There was a bunch of hype around him how he was going to break out. He had over 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. He was 17th in the league in targets with 120, and he played 95.5% of the snap count. with over 50% of the snaps in the slot. So that's where he primarily plays in the slot. Chris Godwin averaged 19.7 fantasy points per game last season. He was just behind Michael Thomas. He finished as wide receiver 2. Godwin did have a 22.2% target share with a 20% red zone target share. The loss of Jameis Winston does hurt Bucks pass catchers overall for fantasy purposes, but Brady does love throwing to the slot, so I still see Chris Godwin having a really good season. Godwin's also going to be a free agent in 2021. So as you can see, the wide receivers are pretty much going to be Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. They obviously also added Rob Gronkowski, so there are a lot of weapons in offense that they can use. At number 5, I have DeAndre Hopkins. He had over 1,100 yards last year and 7 touchdowns. He was 5th in the league in targets with 150. Deshaun Watson was just feeding him. He played every single snap last year, and he played 23.6% of the snaps in the slot. He averaged 18 fantasy points per game. He had a 30.9% target share with a 21.3% red zone share. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins recently got traded to the Cardinals, so I don't expect him to get as many targets as he got when he was on the Texans. As you can see, the over-under receiving yards for DeAndre Hopkins in 2020 is a little bit over 1,100 yards. They do have some other weapons on the Cardinals, such as Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, also Andy Isabella. So DeAndre Hopkins' outlook for 2020 definitely goes down with the trade to the Cardinals. Number 4, I have Julio Jones. His 2019 stats include almost 1,400 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. He was 2nd in the league in targets with 157. He played 79.1% of the snaps and 16.6% in the slot. And he averaged a little bit over 18 fantasy points per game with a 25.7% target share and a 20% red zone share. Julio Jones is obviously an amazing athlete, and he's one of the most consistent receivers in the league. He's one of the safest receivers you can pick in fantasy every year. There is a limited target share now because they got rid of Austin Hooper, who had 88 targets in 2018 and 97 targets in 2019. And all those targets will not go Hayden Hurst's way, who they recently traded for. So I do see Julio Jones having a little bump up in targets. They will have like a bottom 10 defense, I believe. They did draft defensive back A.J. Terrell from Clemson in the first round, who a lot of people think that he wasn't even a first-round talent, so I don't see the defense improving that much. Julio Jones did turn 31, so we could see a decrease in production. That's why I love Calvin Ridley this year so much. But as you can see, even his over-under for receiving yards is a little bit over 1,300 yards. They did trade for tight end Hayden Hurst, but I still do see Julio Jones getting the majority of the targets, with Ridley being right behind him. Number 3, I have Tyreek Hill. He had 860 receiving yards last season and 7 touchdowns. He was 40th in the league in targets with 89. He did play 74.4% of snaps, and he played 35.2% in the slot. He almost had 16 fantasy points per game, and he had 21.9% target share with 15.9% of the red zone target share. As long as Tyreek Hill can stay healthy, he's going to be a top 3 receiver in fantasy. So as you can see in 2018, when Patrick Mahomes, that was his first year starting, when he was playing with Tyreek Hill had over 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. I could see another season just like that, as long as Tyreek Hill can play all 16 games. Tyreek Hill did finish as wide receiver 1 in 2018. As you can see, the depth chart is going to be Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, and Sammy Watkins starting, along with tight end Travis Kelce. So this upcoming season, as long as he gets to play all 16 games, he'll easily be a top 3 receiver. He could be the number 1 receiver. Number 2, I have Davante Adams, another player that was injured last season, so he almost had 1,000 yards, and he had 5 touchdowns. He was 14th in the league in targets with 127, and he played 86.2% of the snaps and 18% in the slot. He had almost 18 fantasy points per game, but he did have a 30.3% target share, and he had 39.7% red zone target share. Aaron Rodgers was looking for Davante Adams always in the red zone. That's probably the highest red zone target share you'll see for a receiver. The Packers really didn't add anyone in free agency or in the draft. So the starters are pretty much going to be Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, and Devin Funchess. Their tight end is going to be Jay Sternberger. And they did draft Josiah DeGuara, but he's probably not going to start for them. So Davante Adams, I do see leading the league in targets. Davante finished as wide receiver 3 in 2018 with Valdez-Scantling and St. Brown starting. They did have Randall Cobb, but he got hurt that year. There's going to be really similar starters this upcoming season as they did in 2018. The only difference is that year it was Valdez-Scantling and St. Brown, but this year it's going to be like Lazard and Funchess, maybe Valdez-Scantling. And Davante Adams had 169 targets in 2018. He had over 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. As you can see, the over-under for his prop is 9.5 touchdowns. That's the most receiving touchdowns I've seen for an over-under this year so far. I was really thinking about putting Davante Adams as number 1 because I think he's going to get targeted so much this year, and they're always going to look for him in the red zone. But I still do have to have Michael Thomas as my number 1. Michael Thomas had over 1,700 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns last season. One of the best receiver seasons you'll ever see. He was first in the league in targets with 185. He played 90.7% of the snaps, and he also played a nice 20.5% in the slot. He had over 23 fantasy points per game. He had a 33.2% target share and a 30.6% red zone target share. So that connection between Michael Thomas and Drew Brees is one of the best connections you'll see in the league. As you can see, his 40 time wasn't that impressive. It was a 4.57. So he's not really a speedster. His route running and his ability to get open is probably the best in the league. Every season in the NFL, Michael Thomas has had major success. He's had over 120 targets in every single season. The Saints did add wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who's going to be their second receiver, so I do see him taking some of the targets. And they also still do have Jared Cook, but I still do see another incredible year from Michael Thomas. As you can see, the over-under for his receiving yards is a little bit over 1,400 yards. His catch percentage the last 2 years is over 80%, so whenever Drew Brees is throwing his way, Michael Thomas is always catching it. You pretty much have to have Michael Thomas as your number one receiver. He's just so consistent. He gets targeted so much. They look for him in the red zone. There's not much to say else. He's just an absolute beast. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe and comment down below what other videos you'd like to see.